little bit sad. And and I think that in combination with the work I was doing as an artist, I was also interested in kind of like this documentation. I did a project where I got my taxi license in New York City and then drove the night shift for a month and recorded all of the audio that like happened in the back of the cab as this like kind of like very large slice of New York. Like even if you live in New York, you realize like you're exposed to like a very small portion of this. And so this ability to kind of like have this window into like all kinds of lives, I found like really incredibly like powerful and interesting. And so in some ways, like the MINUTIAE app combines this kind of like idea of moments that we don't normally capture and this kind of like slice of a bunch of different lives that we don't normally have access to in like one small little bundle.
Great. Thank you. And then Martin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Martin Adolfsson. I'm originally Swedish, but been living in New York for almost 20 years now. My background is in photography. I've been a photographer for over 20 years. And my way into this project started in 2006 when I accidentally discovered a newly built suburb in the outskirts of Bangkok. And I ended up spending a couple of days documenting this kind of Truman Show-esque type of suburb. And that led me to a project called Suburbia Gone Wild, where I visited 7 other newly built suburbs, mainly for the kind of new upper middle class in emerging economies. So I pretended to be a home buyer. I disguised as a home buyer. I had an assistant with me, and we traveled around to openings for these homes. And I walked around and snapped a photo of the homes. And this kind of experience kind of taught me a number of things. Perhaps the most important one was that all these people living in these kind of gated communities that were separated by different countries, different continents, different religions, different ethnicities, all seem to have more in common with each other than they had with a fellow countrymen who lived right on the other side of the gated community. So for me, that was kind of like the way in this thinking about like this kind of connectivity that connects people, even though they are unaware of the fact that they are connected, that they kind of live parallel lives. So that's where I was in 2014 when I was part of, or when I and Daniel were part of the New Inc., which was New Museum's art, tech, and design incubator. And we didn't know each other prior to this, but through a number of weird circumstances, we began talking and realized that we shared this interest in the kind of in between documentation and yeah, I think that's a kind of accurate. What do you say, Daniel? Does that sounds?
Yeah, totally. I think that like it was we were kind of encouraged at one point in time to pitch some ideas for a project that was like run by the New Museum, and I pitched something, and Martin came up after me. He's like, I like what you're talking about, and like I have some ideas, and then we just started talking, and it kind of went from there, and then we both kind of realized like that we both had this interest in like the ordinary moment as well, and I think that that's something that um, like I was also at the same time kind of like starting my path towards like neuroscience, and I was going to Princeton a couple of times a week to volunteer, and was like reading a bunch of like psychology stuff, and part of it was kind of this like, it was just making me think about like with social media and all these other kind of like apps where we have this like these curated, very kind of like polished lives that we show each other that we miss a lot. And as people like Martin as well has lived a lot of different places, and I've lived a lot of different places. At one point in time, a picture came up in that I had taken of a sink from like like maybe 7 countries ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that sink brings back so many memories. And I had no, like, I would not have remembered it otherwise. And I started to think about trying to remember all the previous sinks that I'd had. And it's so difficult, but like when you have those moments, I feel like they're a real kind of like link to a bunch of other memories. And I think that we both kind of like had this interest in the ordinary moment and to kind of like push back against the kind of like this like curated endless scroll of social media at the same time. So that kind of came out of that conversation. And then we had a bunch of like it was just an idea for a while, and then at a certain point in time we just thought like, well, this we both like this idea, we both had the energy to work on it and a bit of time, like let's try and turn it into something. And so kind of almost like I think even while we were working on it, I wasn't really expecting it to actually reach fruition until like we were actually in a design lab with developers who are helping us make it. I was like, wow, this is actually happening. So yeah.
Yeah, that sums it up. That I should say that process from like, oh, this is a fun idea to ending up in Malmö, Sweden, which was where this ideas were fleshed out. It took 2 years and a lot of like, how are we going to pay for this? And luckily, as a Swedish citizen, the generous Swedish government was kind enough to give us a very small grant that kind of helped things kickstart and get this stuff off the ground. But yeah, it was a very kind of interesting journey between going. And I should also add, and I think this is kind of unique, that none of us had any experience building apps or running, a company. So that was also like a kind of a little bit of a steep learning curve. It's like, okay, oh, you actually have to, assemble, certain things need to be in order in order to create an app. And I think that was also, at least for me, that was such a breath of fresh air at that point, and so unexpected. I never in my life thought that I would, have an app. It's like the strangest thing ever. I'm like almost like a Luddite, and here we are like with the anti-social media app all of a sudden. So yeah, so unexpected.
I also like the almost Star Search making of the band nature of how you two came together. Like it was destined to happen. So
Yeah.
um okay, so let's move into the high tech portion of the proceedings. And we want to demo that app. And then I'll talk about why we would even want to archive an app. So um are you able to see the phone?
No, not
No?
yet. No.
Okay, I'm going to change a couple things. Speaker and oh, I know. One more button to push. This one. Okay,
There we go.
perfect. Okay, so maybe you could start by telling us what minutiae is.
Yeah, I can start, and Daniel, feel free to add. So, minutia is, I think we can describe it, or at least that's how we kind of begin thinking about it. It's a way to document the in-between moments of life. And the how it works is that it sends you a daily notification, and at the notification, you snap a photo of whatever's happening in your life at that very moment. And you're then matched with another random stranger somewhere else in the world. There are no filters, likes, or comments. You can't manipulate or edit the moment that you captured in any shape or form. And this process repeats for 1,440 minutes, which is the number of minutes in a full day. So we have something called that we call the grid screen, which is divided into these tiny little squares where each square represents 1 minute. And because you receive one notification per day, it means that it takes 1,440 days or almost 4 years to complete the full cycle. Um, yeah, I think that's like a very short overview. Daniel, you feel free to add.
Yeah, I think that covers it. I think like just in terms of like that 1440 minute kind of paradigm, I think that part of that, what we liked about that when we were first launching was like this idea that you finish an app. Because it seemed like not like with social media in general, like you never finish Facebook, you never finish Twitter, like you're never done with it. It's like the whole idea is that you're never done. Like you should spend all your time on there. And I think that that kind of idea of the app that like there's actually not much you can do with it. It's like it's like a very limited exposure once a day. I think that that to us, like I remember telling this to the app developers in Sweden, they're like, your app has no functionality, and we're like, no, that's the point. That's what we're going for. And I think that that kind of like limitation is something that I really like about the project and continue to appreciate.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to kind of slowly flip through pictures. Martin, maybe you could give us a walkthrough of the app, and I could actually maybe go back to the start.
Yep, sure.
Um, and can I go back to the start, or do I need to
Yes, well,
shut
I
it
think you
down?
can if you go
Shut it
to the
down?
menu.
Or
If you go to the menu page and you go about, then you get to there we go.
okay.
Yeah, you approached us in, I would want to say 2018, 2019, perhaps.
It was
Something
2019.
like that. Yeah.
I think it was 19, yeah.
With this idea of archiving the app. Um, and obviously the project spans for 4 years. So we said, well, let's archive it once you complete your 1,440-day cycle. And so around 2021, maybe something like that, we then embarked on the more challenging part, which was how do you archive an app that has a functionality that means that you need to open and respond to a prompt once a day. And so that meant that we had to kind of customize and do a special version of the app for Columbia Archive because the functionality of the app just doesn't allow anyone to simply use it the way it's normally being used. So what we did was that we reached out to a handful of participants who had completed their 1,440-day cycle and asked them whether or not they wanted to have their moments included in the app. And we got, I think, 11 response. We could probably have got more. I now in hindsight, I don't know why we settled on 11. It's such a like odd number. We could probably have gotten way more because it was at that point thousands of people who have had completed it. But
I'm sure you had a
we
reason. You usually have a reason for
yeah,
specific
I'm sure there was a reason. I just
numbers.
can't remember what the reason was. But anyway, so we had 11 participants who agreed to have their moments included in the app. So what we did, if you go to the grid again, I think you just continue. Yeah. So you can then swipe left or right to navigate between the different um, participants' moments. So Kimberly, yeah. So here's one, here's another, and
I
as you
didn't.
can see,
I'm just learning this now. Today I learned.
oh, there you go. Yeah, the navigation part is like that's something that's like a general theme with the project is that we're very short on details, exactly how to navigate things. But anyway, so what this means is that in this particular version of the app, you can tap on the moment and up pops this little image, and it follows a very specific logic, which might not seem obvious to begin with, but the timestamp is actually uh, in year, month, day, hour, minute. And if you swipe left or right, doesn't matter, you can tell that the minute changes. So the hour remains the same, but the minute changes. So here's 25, you swipe left again, it's 24, and then it's 23, etc. So a entire day is documented by this particular participant. The black squares that we see represent moments that the particular participant missed. So that's why they're black, like this one, for instance. I should also say in the app version, the modern version of the app, the black squares are no longer part of the timeline. That's something that we removed. But in the original part, it was actually included. Maybe not the most user-friendly experience, but again. Um, but yeah, so that's basically what the archive version of the app does. And as you can tell, the difference here is that it doesn't send you a push notification, which the other app does, because that would be hard since it sits in a box somewhere. Um, so yeah, this is again, I have a register of who the people of their email of the people who have donated their archive to the archive, but they remain anonymous. We don't know who they are, except that they live in the Netherlands. Probably one of them. I think that's what we try to get a little bit of a distribution in terms of the location. I think that's what we were aiming for. So it was not only in North America and Europe, but yeah, I think that's what we were aiming for. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the technicality of it. Yeah.
Great, thanks. As and when questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat box. Martin, can you go back to why you decided to remove the black squares from the timeline from the current app?
Simply because it wasn't very user friendly. So the big challenge with a project like this is that you need to kind of straddle this very fine line between maintaining the core artistic concept and accessibility. If you go too far on either side, you either lose the kind of the integrity of what the project was about. If you go too far to the other side, no one will be able to use it because it's just you limit the amount of people who would be interested in it. So this is like one of the constant kind of challenges that I'm dealing with whenever I'm trying to make a decision about new app features, etc., is to figure out like where is this line between maintaining artistic integrity, keeping the spirit of the project intact, versus making it accessible to people so that you don't need to be, a quote unquote art person in order to participate. It should be something that anyone with a smartphone and a bit of curiosity can participate in. So that's why we removed it, because it just wasn't something it made it less accessible to a larger audience.
And so it sounds like you're also in this whole process, like you said, weren't tech people, tech developers, but you're learning a lot about like what makes an app good or usable or sticky, but then having to think about them in the context of this project, counter to the kind of addictive ways that app developers think.
Exactly, and that's always a very fine line. And I think that, like again, like as Daniel mentioned, it's like the initial, when we first approached the developers for this, they were like, well, you want to maximize how much people use the app, like that's why people build apps. And we're like, no, like we don't, like you can only use it for 1 minute per day. And again, like that's always like the kind of like this fine line of maintaining that, uh, being able to have an experience that as a participant you can enjoy and you get something out of, and still keeping the original idea intact somehow.
Okay. We have a question from Melanie in the chat, which is what types of things surprised you all about? And then it goes all about how people engaged with this app. What was
Um,
surprising?
yeah, Daniel, maybe do you want to
I can
take it?
just jump in because I think
Yep.
that the initial thing was that when we built this, we didn't know if anyone was going to use it. Of course, you like it's you when you make something like this, you put it out there, and then it's like a question mark. It's like, I knew that I liked it and I thought it was a good idea, but was it just going to be me and Martin and we would just see each other's photos each day? Like we didn't really have to build the whole app to do that, theoretically. But so I think I was first just surprised that people the response we got was really positive. We had an article in Wired in the early days when we first launched it, And at that point in time, we had it free because we're like, we need to get some people to be using it so that there's enough people that it's interesting to use it. And I remember like after the article went up, like we had to like cancel like the free part because we were worried about like, oh, how are we going to pay for like all of the bandwidth and stuff like that? We don't have a budget. We don't have any investors. We don't have any like venture capital. We're not looking for that. So like we wanted to kind of keep it small. So I think we were for my initial thing was like I was surprised that it became as popular as it did, as quickly as it did, even though like I think our expectations were low to start. And then I think that I was just like kind of surprised or touched by kind of like the messages we would get from people sometimes. I remember like one in particular that kind of like struck me was there was a woman from Hawaii who said this was like right before the volcano and it destroyed her home and she's like, yeah, I actually realized I didn't have any pictures of my home except for the ones in minutia. And she was like, "Thank you very much." Like, obviously this is like a tragic moment and like a really sad thing, but the fact that like, it was exactly that. It's like I don't take pictures of my house because I live here and walk in the door every day and don't think about it. But this is kind of like something that like really made me think about that. And I think like that kind of like positive reaction that people had to being forced to capture their everyday moments and finding that a meaningful experience was just like that was incredibly gratifying because that's what we were hoping for. And so we don't know if that's actually going to be the case for the people that are taking part.
Yeah, I should add that the person with who lived with the volcano got their entire home burnt down by a volcano eruption. So that's why they didn't have any photos taken. So their entire home and surrounding area was just covered in lava, basically. So this was minutia was really the only way that any of that prior experience was documented, which was a pretty special experience. I mean, it's a special story and it's a very sad story, but yeah, got my point.
Yeah. So there's a question, Shauna, if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, please jump in and correct me. Thanking you both for your hard work and absolutely loves the app. And John is curious about where Midnight is from the perspective of the app. And if you want to clarify, please go ahead. If
Yeah,
there is a
yeah, this is a very good question. And also, again, I feel like in terms of just like things can definitely be a little bit more informative in terms of like how the app works. It's something that will be added eventually. But Midnight, it's so the Midnight is UTC, which is Universal Coordinated Time, something like that. And it's GMT, but without daylight savings, I think. So that's midnight. Um, and part of that is simply because because all participants received the notification at the exact same time, we needed to kind of align on one particular time zone to like stick with. And it felt like UTC became the obvious choice since that's kind of where the day starts and ends. Um, so yeah, it's UTC time. So depending on where in the world you are, that means that some days you might receive two alerts in a day, sometimes none, a little bit depending on when the notification happens according to UTC. A little bit, yeah, hard, but yeah.
And I would just add, like, so you can kind of see in the images too, where like because the
Yeah,
UTC is like agnostic to your own particular time zone, you can kind of see in the images for each person like where midnight is for them and where their night is based on like all the like the black boxes. So that can inform things a little bit. But then if you're traveling, then all of a sudden like that is no longer nighttime, and so then you have pictures that can show up like in what looks like the middle of the night, even if you weren't up in the middle of the night. So yeah, it gets a little bit complicated.
okay. There's a couple of questions that I think will can move us into talking about the like why archive the app, and then I'll jump back to the questions. So I think I might have been one of the people who read about Minutia in Wired, and so jumped on the bandwagon then. And Just initially, I was already interested in archiving apps because I had been hearing data about like how much of the internet we've lost since, for example, the early 1990s, because things just haven't been backed up, or there's been kind of bit rot, the zeros and O's, and things just get kind of wacky. Um, and also, I was hearing about video games not being archived, even though there's now like a video game history like network, and there's also a software preservation network. And so I was curious to see if we could archive an app because there are like different art project apps I'd seen before and I still to this day have them on my phone, even though they don't work because they've been removed from Apple's App Store. And I wanted to remember what these apps are like. And I think I might even have a few files on my computer, though I have no idea how you would actually like make them run. So based on that interest, and knowing that like I do oral history, I was like, well, I have to tie this to oral history somehow. And I'm also interested in the stories of people who make apps and to think about that creative process, but also technological change. So I was really happy to um, have Martin and Daniel actually respond and respond enthusiastically about the prospect of the project. And I don't know for sure. I've looked around and I don't know for sure if Columbia is the first institution to collect an app in its archive. And it's less the kind of getting there first that was important for me and more about just seeing how we could do it and what that collection would look like. And so, in addition to the oral histories with both creators, we also have the bespoke app, which we've been looking at. And then we also have two of the sort of early bindings of the volumes. Then, and there, I volunteered to have my pictures be there. So I guess I have a record of my house. Should disaster strike and I need something for the insurance companies, I'll just be like, here you go. So we have those items, and then we also decided to archive the code for the app. And the code isn't going to be available because the app is still active. But we wanted to, this is like we said, this is an experiment of having the app on a phone. I don't know of any other collection where you would go to the rare book and manuscript reading room and have to access something through a cell phone. So then that becomes another artifact that we have to think about, if the phone dies, how do we reinstall the app? We've had to air gap the app, which means that we've tried to keep it off of the internet so that there's no, and turned off any automatic updates because that would probably break the app. So it was really a matter of being excited to explore all of these different questions and how we can do this, and to also provide researchers with the actual experience of using the app, but then also these different modes of experiencing the archive itself. So maybe we could actually, I'll go back to this question. Karen asks, is the documentation of the app at the Nordic Museum in Sweden built in the same way as Columbia?
Um, I can answer that. No. So this is something that we recently began working with. So the Nordic Museum in Sweden, in Stockholm, is a very old institution, and they approached us because they collect everyday moments from the Nordic countries. So what we did was that we reached out to people who have purchased a book and who reside in the Nordic countries to ask whether or not they want to have their digital book part of the archive. So this is quite different from this project that we had with Columbia, where at Columbia we built a separate app for the Nordic Museum. They're only interested in the books, in the digital version of the books itself. So it's quite different.
Daniel, did you have anything to add about that?
No, that covers it.
Okay. Um, so Catchment understands that this isn't tech support, but it has never been able to see the larger images or, as mentioned, the black box pics in the app. I don't know if Martin, you can speak to that at all.
The larger images, so you can only like view the larger images once you complete the full 1,440-day journey. And as Daniel mentioned, part of the reason is simply that we designed it in a way that is meant for you not to be spending basically any time outside of the moment that you capture in the app. Like it's designed to basically not be used. That's the reason why it's in grayscale. Uh, that's the reason why we limit it to 1 minute that you can view your images after you capture them. So that's like it's part of this kind of artistic approach of thinking about apps critically as a way for something that doesn't necessarily rob you of your attention and time, but give you something that is hopefully helpful and useful. So that's the reason for that. I
Yeah.
hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Sometimes they're good pictures, so I screen capture them.
Yeah. That's good. You can also exactly at the end when you complete your full cycle, you can tap on the photos in the grid and see them
Okay.
and navigate through them.
I was jealous. But also in that comment, I wrote, this app has sharpened my observation skills. And as you know, I've been a photographer for 40 years. But it's like, I'm like, oh, that would be a good minutia. And I'm like, come on, phone. But
Excellent. That's
yeah.
yeah. I mean, and I should mention like when we created this to begin with, there were like to create an app wasn't obvious for obvious reasons since none of us had ever done an app. But we were debating and talking for quite some time about different ways of documenting the in between. And then maybe you can talk more about this, but it's like we were talking about like um, mounting cameras on like in between places in the city. Like we were like experiment with all these like different ideas of documenting the in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like that was yeah in very early days, and those were fun conversations. I remember even like part of it was also inspired by this idea of of big data and kind of like this fact that this was like I mean we really live in the big data era now with AI, but I feel like the big data kind of moment was on the rise even a decade ago, and this idea of kind of like trying to capture information from big data to in our way of thinking was like it was kind of erasing a lot of like anecdotal kind of experience. And so we were talking even like, it'd be fun to kind of just like go on a street corner in New York and kind of like try to get like a little story from every person that passed. And so it was even like speaking of oral histories. So we were thinking very broad at the beginning, just kind of this idea of like trying to get these individual moments where we also kind of like talked about this as like a self-portrait of sorts too, and I think like that idea of like um, the and again just going back like the image like your Instagram reel is not you, right? It's like the highlight version of you, and so to kind of like actually have like an authentic version of you. And I think even like I think in some ways like taking part in minutia like felt like something where it was like even a bit vulnerable where you have to I felt like sometimes like oh no, this is kind of embarrassing, I'm taking another picture of my computer screen. It's like this is and then into like also about like the moment of like I was like I'm doing something interesting right now, can minutia please go off? It's like otherwise, you're just going to think this is all I do. So I think like that kind of like, but it's also good to recognize that. And so I think that that kind of like thinking about like how to capture this and how to capture ourselves in a way that was authentic. Like we had a lot of conversations about that, and we landed on this, but it could have been something else theoretically.
It's very interesting to just over the course of us working together, like definitely thinking about how we construct ourselves and perform for different social media apps. But now that you mentioned like AI and also just the proliferation of cameras in public and private spaces, Like that's so much imagery and documentation without a story attached to it, but the tenor of the image capture gives it a different kind of feeling, I think. Um, Melanie says, such a wonderful project. This is a question for Daniel, non-app related. Did you create an audio documentary or piece about the taxi cab audio? Is it accessible anywhere?
I did. It was like a 45-minute kind of like audio pastiche of the whole month. Um, and I actually presented it I presented it a few places, but the main presentation took place during the Armory Art Fair in New York. And there's a bunch of art fairs. Then I was driving people between the art fairs in a taxi cab while they listened to all of these
Oh,
conversations
yeah.
that I'd recorded during the evening. So that was like the main
Very cool.
modality of presentation. Yeah.
Is it online anywhere now?
I haven't, I think I haven't put the whole thing online. I think that part of it was, although I had like actually gotten the lawyers, like they have like a beautiful service in New York where there's like lawyers that pro bono take on kind of like sketchy legal matters for artists. And so they had taken
Questionable.
on my case because like, at first I wasn't that worried about it, but then it got covered in the New York Times. So like, oh, I better make sure that like not like going to be sued. And so I talked to them and they're like, yes, you're actually like in the clear based on case law and stuff like that. Like for anyway, it's a little bit complicated, but I just felt a little bit nervous about like putting it online where everyone could see it. I felt like it was a bit more of like a private experience. So it's not like the audio is not publicly available.
Okay, got it. There's some conversation in the chat about user experiences of the app. So if anyone would like to unmute and talk about their experience using the app, whether that's when you started or as it evolved, we would love to hear that. Um, I could start with just the note that I was surprised at how initially the alerts drove me nuts. And I think this was before we had do not disturb on phones. So there was some awareness of, oh, I could just turn my phone off or put it in the other room. And then I think maybe the do not disturb and all that stuff came later in the app. But that was probably the first maybe 2 weeks. And then after that, like everybody's saying, I really looked forward to being pinged. And it was also kind of neat to watch over the last few years the evolution of the audience and how the photos change. So, Martin, would you be able to speak to that? Because we've discussed it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So in the very beginning, as Daniel mentioned, we got a little bit of press. Wired wrote about it, Vice wrote about it, Financial Times wrote about it, a couple of Swedish publications wrote about it. So we had a little bit of like momentum to begin with, but it was mainly, the people who read those outlets that were, participating in it. So it wasn't necessarily like a cross section of a kind of society. And uh, I feel like that was always like a big part of the spirit of the project, was that it would be a representation of society to the best of its ability. So over time, we have made an effort to really kind of broaden it and making sure to try to get a more diverse group of participants. One big part of that was to introduce the Android version, which we did in 2021, I believe. Another big part of that was simply, and this is, it hurts me to say this, but we also had a bit of an issue because the project was really well received and people really appreciated it, but it was just so few people that knew about it. And because we were self-funded, we didn't have the means to, reach a broader audience. So we were kind of like stuck in this limbo. And then the app went viral on TikTok, which is kind of amazing. I would say 3 years ago. And that was a little bit for me personally, like a bit of a aha moment, because I don't use social media personally, but I also at that point understood the power of it and how it can work in your benefit if you want to share your message. Um, so as a result of that, reluctantly, I created a social media account for the app in itself, and as a result of that, we've also been able to reach a much broader audience in countries that we otherwise would not have any participants. So I'm now very happy to say that we actually have participants in every country. I think West Sahara might be the only one that we don't have participants in, which might not be a country, depending on who you ask. But outside of that, we have people in every single country. There's still majority is still in the US because it's in English. This is where we started. But we're still working our way and kind of expanding it and really trying to make sure that we have a global representation. And this is like I think the number one feedback that we keep receiving is that people love, love, love to be matched with someone from a completely different culture and country and realize that their everyday life looks almost identical to your own. And I think that's really like the kind of like the true spirit of what we really wanted to achieve in the first place was like these kind of in between moments are somewhat global and unifying. That it's the daily routine of life somewhat looks somewhat similar no matter where in the world you live. And it's very easy to forget that, especially if you're absorbed with all the kind of divisive language of social media. But the underpinning idea is that there's way more that people have in common than what separates us. And I think that's really what we like was a major kind of factor to minutia, and also one of the reasons why people love it and why they love to be matched with someone. And I should say, maybe Daniel, I don't know if you remember this, but initially I think that the reason why we brought that part to begin with was because we didn't think that anyone would actually want to take boring photos of their sink or their, I don't know, shoe rack or whatever it was. And we're like, well, we need some kind of incentive because this is just so boring. No one is going to care about this. I don't know if that's true. I think that people still enjoyed actually just documenting their own life, but I do think that it adds like an additional layer to it. But Daniel can probably speak more about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think like part of it was, I don't know if you've had this experience, but if you go to like a flea market and especially like here in Europe, when you go to the flea markets, there's often like these sellers that have like a bin of photos.
Mhm.
And they're like these photos of people that like, it's like a wedding photo, and you're like, wow, like this, it's kind of like it feels weird in a way, like you're looking through these people's lives, but also like very fascinating. I always found that like a very interesting experience, and I feel like in some ways that's what I liked about this idea. It was like it's almost like you find an anonymous person's photo album on the side of the road, and you get to flip through it for a minute and just like get a sense of another life. And I think that it's totally rich. It makes it even richer if it's like someone's life that you would never have exposure to otherwise. So I think like that part of it was like really like exciting for me. Like this idea of like, wow, I can look through a bunch of like every day I can look through someone's photo album. Like just personally, that's like something that I found like from like a voyeuristic point of view, but like a voyeuristic where it's anonymous at the same time. So I think that like obviously you can tell like as someone who like recorded people on a have I like to learn about other people's lives. And so this was like definitely aligned with that. And just on the TikTok thing too, like I remember when Martin first like shared with me that it had gone viral on TikTok, I felt very ambivalent about it. But then I've actually, like I'm in the research that like I do, I come across a lot of papers and research that's being done. And one of the things that like I came across like in the past years was like this fact that, when they interview, especially teens, but like even adults about social media, oftentimes they find like a majority of people kind of wish that there wasn't social media, but because it's there, they feel like they have to be on it. But being on it is like a stressful experience. And I think that in some ways, like having minutia be presented to you through this like TikTok. It's almost like this like antidote in a way. So
Hmm.
maybe like, it's providing some sort of service to people that kind of, feel forced in a way to be part of this like, self-presentation algorithm.
Well,
Um,
I'm sorry.
Oh, just a quick note that I also noted, and I could be making this up, Martin, and you could verify, but it seemed like once the app hit TikTok and like younger people were on it, suddenly, and I don't know if this was because front-facing cameras were now available, but I think it was right before that. It seemed like young people were turning the camera on themselves and doing selfies in a way that I hadn't noticed before and or hadn't thought of doing, even though I am also vain, but I just never thought to turn the camera around on myself.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think so. I mean, again, like what's so kind of strange about this project, and like people assume that, like, oh my God, you must see all the photos. It's like I have, as even as the founder, I have the exact same experience as anyone else. It's like it's purely anecdotal, is because it's like this is what I see when I use the app for my personal use every day. I do think that there is something kind of generational about that. That yes, perhaps that people, yeah, turn the camera more towards themselves. I think that might be true. I should also mention that when we launched it, I think the forward-facing camera, sorry, the back-facing, the selfie camera was just being introduced on the iPhone, and this is like 2014, 2015. And there were like selfies explosion. It was selfies everywhere. Selfies, 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 selfies. And part of this was also that was why we disabled the selfie cam. So you can only use the forward-facing cam on the app as a response to this avalanche of selfies. I don't these days. I don't know. I don't have any like data on the type of images and what people do capture. But yeah, it might be that with a slightly younger cohort that we see more of that, maybe.
And I will speak to that if I can. I
Yep.
did find you on Instagram, which was great because I somehow missed you on Wired. But I also just quickly had an opposite start to this than Kimberly did. I was OCD about missing the alerts. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm retired, so I didn't have to worry about it going off in a meeting or something. But I've since calmed myself, so don't worry. But also to the selfie thing, I mean, I don't do selfies. Just I'm not gonna, whatever. Anyway, I took a totally natural, just stand in front of the bathroom window, take a mirror and take a picture of myself. And the reason I did that was because a couple of my stranger matchups did show who they were, and I loved seeing who the person was. So it's only gonna be one of, thousands of pictures of me, but maybe somebody will come across that and say, oh, she looks like me, or oh, she looks weird. Oh, she's American.
Interesting.
So I don't know.
I never thought about that, but that's a really interesting way exactly of giving a face to the
Mhm.
story in a way.
um, Martin, there's a question about if the app is still free, and I was looking and I can see it's now on a subscription model. So maybe you could talk about the evolution of pricing and availability.
Yep. I should say the app is free. It has gone through different iterations. The first couple of months it was free. Then we had some press, and we were like, as Daniel mentioned, we were like, how are we going to pay for this? So we had a one-time fee at that point. And then we introduced, I think a year later, we introduced subscription. And that was the modus operandi up until 2023, I think. And one of the challenges that we faced was that um, because people are very, people who participate, they're very engaged in it, which is very, very great. But it's also very hard to convince someone that is not part of it to download an app that costs money. It's very, very hard. You need to be basically sitting next to this person and preaching to them how wonderful this app is. And that also means that there are a lot of people who would probably be interested in this concept had they had a bit of opportunity and time to actually familiarize themselves with it. So in 2023, we kind of changed the modus a little bit. So we have like a free tier that's free. And then because the project is a self-funded project, we don't have any backers or investors, anything like that. We said, you know what? If you are someone who believe in the idea that apps and art can be apps, and that this type of project should exist, maybe you would be interested to become a subscriber or a supporter, just like you would with your local art institution at home. You maybe want to donate a little bit to your local museum because you enjoy the shows that they put on, you enjoy the experience, and it's something that you want to keep going. So that's kind of what we did. It's like we changed the model and say, you don't have to pay, but if you enjoy this, if you think that this is something that is of value to you and to society in general, you know, become a supporter. So that's basically the model that we took on, which is like a museum model basically, that allows you to use it for free and then pay a little bit extra if you enjoy it basically. And I think that's also the like as a result of this, it also has opened it up to people who one might not be in a situation where they are students where they don't have money but they want to participate, or people who are like the idea but they're not really sure that they want to pay for it. Well, at least they have the opportunity to use it and be part of it, and then if they then choose to donate further down the line, perfect. If not, that's also okay. So I feel like this is kind of like it works pretty well. And luckily, I should say that we have I think because of the somewhat uniqueness of the project, this is something that people care about, and so yeah, people are willing to help us sponsor it, and which is the reason why we can continue doing it. Operating something like this is certainly not cheap. We also have developers that cost a lot of money, even though they're very, very good. So like even, yeah, just like any kind of operation, like running a museum, it costs money. Running an app, it costs money. So this is why we can continue doing this way.
If there are also questions about the archive or how to access it, you can ask those, and I can also post some blog posts that describe all of that. I stumbled upon this picture and thought, okay, now we are entering the singularity, minutia picture of the minutia app. Um, Daniel, I thought I would ask you, in hindsight, is there anything that you wish the app could do that wasn't possible when you and Martin created it?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I'm like very happy with the app. Like I think it's very simple, and I think in some ways, I feel like it's even what I like about it is like is even stronger now than it was before. I feel like I think that one of the things I liked about it was always that it felt like it was trying to tap into something authentic. These kind of like these in between moments, as Martin was saying, that kind of like make up our lives. And I think that these days, with like AI, I'm a researcher, and so like I'm using AI a lot, and my partner is in an AI lab, so this is like a very big part of my life. Um, but it's just like it's so simple to kind of like not only can you curate your life, but you can invent your life. And like not only can you invent your life, but you can invent a new person who is like a virtual influencer. So there's virtual people on these apps, and I just feel like it's becoming like farther and farther divorced from kind of like any semblance of reality. Um, and I think like in a way, like the fact that Minutia is just it's still doing its simple thing of like there's 1 minute, you have the time to take a photo. Um, I think that I like that, and I feel like I actually wouldn't change anything about that.
Cool. It's great to be satisfied with a
Yeah.
project, even years on.
I think
Um,
that that's just to add to that point. I think that like what's interesting now, as Daniel mentioned, is like when we created this, um, if I remember correctly, this was like the idea was born in 2014. At that point, I don't think there were any influencers. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. But we came about it from this point of like our friends or maybe acquaintances were kind of like curating their life in a way that didn't feel particularly authentic. And that's kind of where we're like, this doesn't seem right. And then people stopped posting less and less and less. And we're starting to see more and more content from like professional content creators. And which also like meant that like social media kind of morphed into this different platform. Like it took on a much bigger role. And today we see this, incredible polarization. Like if you live on the internet, you will think that the world is about to be civil war. Like it's a fact. And I think that that's like an important part that we're trying to emphasize that like actually like the real world is still a bunch of shoe racks and people watching Netflix. It's not people trying to dunk each other or humiliate each other. Like the world is still a very mundane and somewhat boring place, and that's okay. That's how it should be. And I think that like also now, like when we're, as Dane mentioned, like moving into AI, like we're like about to see this development just supersede by 10x, where all of a sudden we will have virtual replicas of ourselves. It won't be even people we won't be even real humans who are influencers. It will be a digital version of them. And I think that even like so, like what's kind of amazing is that we've been around for 8 years, almost 10 years since the idea was created. And I feel like the project is just becoming more and more relevant and more important for every year. And I think that's pretty amazing.
um, so Martin, do you want to talk about maybe the future of the app or the future of the photos?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the future of the project, the app and the project. So currently, like the when we think about Minutia, we primarily think about the app. The kind of ironic thing is that when we first launched it, we actually launched it with a 2,880 page book. Daniel and I went to different art book fairs and sold people on the idea of a book that had 2,880 pages and that they could buy for the future selves. And we luckily it got a lot of people very curious. And as time proceeds, even though that particular book, which we call now the limited edition book, is still quite expensive, we actually have a lot of people who are interested in it and have ordered their copy of it. But Minutia, the way I see it, is kind of bit about expanding the in between. Like we have, 5 senses. The app in itself is a great way of using, our eyes and images to capture things. But we also have smells. We have our hearing. We have, senses. We'll have like different ways of taking in and understanding the world. So this is one of the areas that we're currently kind of investigating and thinking about, like how can we continue to document the in-between, not only through images, but through other means as well. That's like not invasive. Like it's not that you mount like, I don't know, some kind of like 3D goggle on your head and document everything around you, but instead trying to kind of extend this experience of the in-between so that it might not necessarily only be through images, but it could also be through sound or maybe through smell and scents, etc. So those are like kind of like the things that are percolating. Again, we're like a independent art project, so our funds are very limited. Anytime we have a little bit of a surge in new people supporting the project, those monies are quickly spent on building some kind of new extension or adding something new. But yeah, that's where we're going. And I also wanted to say, like, when we started the project, as Daniel mentioned, I don't think that we thought that it would, like, that anyone would even finish 4 years, to the point where we didn't even finish the app. They didn't have one, like, there wasn't like what we call like an offboarding, because we just had built that because we never thought that anyone would finish it. But so this is also something that we're thinking about, like, how do we think about this archive and these now millions of images for the future? What does that look like? I mean, like, we have a very unique archive of images that participants from all around the world have captured. So that's also something that we're thinking about. Obviously, like, getting consent from people and making sure that, if you don't want your images to be stored for future generations, you don't have to. But yeah, so those are like kind of things that are like in the pipeline, but it's also a very long pipeline, so things might take a little bit of time.
Nice. If there are no other questions, I'm going to start wrapping up by thanking Daniel and Martin for being willing to do this and continue the project. It's really gratifying to see how the project evolves, and also how your thinking about the project evolves, and how my own thinking as a participant and also as an archivist evolve. So I will just do one like short housekeeping note pitch for the next How We Listen, which is going to take place on Tuesday, October 14th. And it's a conversation with a scholar by the name of Benjamin Shepherd, scholar and activist. And it's about his book called On Activism, Friendships and Fighting, Oral Histories, Strategies, and Conflicts. So again, that's on October 14th. And I will try to advertise in some of the same places that you heard about this event, so you have those details. But you can also just email the Oral History Archive at Columbia. If you just do a search, you'll find us, and you'll find our email address. And as a follow-up, we will discuss whether or not we want to distribute a recording, or if we want to maybe share a transcript of the conversation. And then I'll also include just links to the app and also to Daniel and Martin's website. So thank you so much for joining us. Martin, Danny, any last words?
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this. We really appreciated you putting all this together. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Shauna from Australia. I just wanted to thank you both, Daniel and Martin, for this amazing app. I'm a psychologist in Australia, and my camera's off because it's, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning here, but it's absolutely brilliant. What I love, there's so much that I love about it, but one of the things is that I've done a lot of travel around the world, but I just love how this connects me to places I've never, ever been to. And of course, places I have been to, but not just the countries, but and that geographical awareness that comes with it, but also the people themselves. So there's this urge to want to. I've had a paired up with somebody in Turkey, and soon after that, there was an earthquake in Turkey, and I'm thinking, I hope that person is okay that I paired up with. So there's this real urge to want to follow up and do what social media has trained us to do, but also just to know that someone's okay. So it's beautiful, but there's that element of frustration, I think, sometimes. It's minor in comparison to the benefits of the app. It's just wonderful. Yeah, so thank you both.
Thank you so much. And yeah, good morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much for attending. We're gonna, Martin, Daniel, if you want to hang out for a second after everybody logs off, I just have like a
Thank
little wrap-up
you.
question. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Bye-bye.
evening or good morning or a good day.
So
All the time zones.